Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into it. So question that I have for you, there's a lot right now, and we've had a lot in the last couple of years with this, and I have my opinions of where this is coming from, but we're seeing it more and more. But firing a head coach at a major college football program mid-season, for or against, what's the benefit?
Absolutely hate it. It drives me crazy. You look at the tenure. The big one that stands out is the Penn State firing. Definitely understand. Hey, going to UCLA, a winless program, maybe had 100 people in the stands that actually paid for a ticket. The rest, they probably opened the gates and were holding, had some sign flippers saying, "Please come in and make the stadium a little bit more full on TV." I remember that when the Avs were having their worst season. I had a buddy that worked for him, and every night was like, "Hey, I've got 8 free tickets," because the Avs were getting, they looked bad on TV. Had to fill the lower bowl at least. Just fill the lower bowl, move down. I think it just sets a bad precedent. I feel like the boosters, the new students that are only there for 4 years, are easily calling for firings. There is no tenure in sports. When I look at some of the head coaches that have been long respected, they're the longest tenured coach is, if they're at 10 years, that's an eternity. So you're looking at these coaches at programs that have developed an identity that, hey, sports is not a given. If it was, we'd have the same 5 teams just rotating, or each team would take a turn. We'd have a participation trophy, and give points out to those top programs, and they just remain at the top. So while I think there is definitely some cause for concern with, hey, this coach isn't working out, we need some new blood. The quick way that they're pulling the trigger now, it feels like if you go on a 2 or 3 game losing streak, it's over. You might as well pack your bags. On top of that, when you talked about, is there a benefit to it? What did Franklin get paid out? $49 million to get fired. I mean, John,
Well, that's
can you
not
imagine?
the whole story there. If he goes and gets another job, that gets mitigated
Right. But at the
significantly.
same time, how would you feel as a coach? You don't have any loyalty at all. You're like, hey, if I go on a losing streak, I'll wipe my tears, the 49 million, and then decide, do I want to keep coaching? I still think it's just wild how many coaches. Pete Carroll looks absolutely amazing running out on the NFL field, but you're just like, you are in your late 70s, my friend.
He's
Um,
still getting physical in practice with those
yeah,
guys.
yeah,
These are NFL players.
you look at Belichick, you're like, how quickly are these guys, going to pass after? That's all they know. They just know the X's and O's on the sideline, working late hours. I saw, I'm going on a tangent here, but coaching gets me fired up. They pulled a bunch of top Power 5 conference coaches, asking them how much sleep they get on a nightly basis. The average was about 3 to 4 hours for a lot of the coaches. So they're up, burning the midnight oil, not burning it with their families. They're looking at game tape. They're looking at all the different insights and analytics that we have now with their film departments. You do all that work just to make it through a half a season, or, a season and a half, and then you have to build up your recruits again. And it's messy. Maybe that's my boomer take now. I think if you would have asked me this question 15 years ago, like, heck, I want a losing streak. He's trash. Get him out of here.
That's really the source of this question is, and partially because of the N that I'm wearing on this hat, one of the guys that is being talked about as a replacement for Franklin, that rule at Nebraska, because he, a Penn State alum, is very close with Penn State athletic director Matt Kraft. I just think be careful, how I just think you have to be realistic. Like, yes, you have the funding, and we know at this point so much of it is funding. If you've got NIL funding, I take a look at Indiana. They just got a big boost from Mark Cuban, who has historically, he's a sports guy, but historically has never given to the athletic department at Indiana.
Right.
And he is an alum, obviously. Otherwise, why would he be attracted? But he meets with Kurt Signetti, and decides after meeting with him, hey, we're both from Pittsburgh. We're similar guys. We're simpatico here. I think I am going to go ahead and make a large contribution. And I don't know what that contribution was, but talking about a multi-billionaire in Mark Cuban. So when you get that funding, you are able to be competitive. Indiana historically terrible at football. And now all of a sudden, I would say, and I think most pundits would agree, they're top 3 in the Big Ten in football. And their basketball program is in the crapper.
Yeah.
They're a blue blood basketball program.
What does that lead you to believe? Who's actually pulling the strings at these universities?
Well, see, and that's the thing is that you've got donors. I think one of the biggest donors for Penn State is Pagula, the owner of the Bills. And the rumor was that he really wanted James Franklin to hire Brady away from the Bills as the new OC. Franklin didn't want to do that, and various other conflicts internally with James Franklin, where basically he was taking the rope that they were giving him and he was making a noose, and then so they were ready for. I mean, you have a 3-game losing streak. It's not the 3-game losing streak, first of all. You lose to Oregon at home. Oregon they're at least a top 10 team, right? I mean, no question. That's not as big of a deal. And then you turn around, though, and you lose to UCLA at home, and then you lose to Northwestern. My issue is you look at UCLA's record, and sure, yeah, I mean, they just fired their coach. They are a program that is an absolute mess. But are they untalented? No. Nico Iamleva was a couple of years ago the most highly touted quarterback in the country.
Right.
He's their quarterback. I think he's an elite player. And you can't discount what happens sometimes when a coach gets fired mid-season for that locker room. An interim guy takes over and just sparks something. It might be a flash in the pan, might not be long term, but it changes something. And so, I mean, if you're Penn State, can you lose to them? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that's a bad loss, but nonetheless, UCLA for like Nebraska now, we got to go to the Rose Bowl and play UCLA. That was a game that looked like a sure win, and I don't think it is anymore. And not because I think UCLA is playoff bound or anything crazy like that.
Did you watch the UCLA game?
I didn't watch the whole thing.
I feel like a lot of teams, especially in football, when it's play-by-play, they pull out all the tricks. So all the trick plays, all the gadget plays, we're going to leave it all on the table. We have nothing to lose. Haven't won a game. Let's go ahead and see if we can go upset a top power. I don't know how much UCLA has left for the rest of the season to get up for a Nebraska or another team.
You might be right.
For that Penn State game, it was all here's my hand. I'm going all in. If we lose, we're supposed to. But if we win, what a win for our program. Let's lift our offensive coordinator, Neuheisel, up on the shoulders. Let's make a big to-do about it. And for a program,
yeah, and that's the other thing. He's your brand new. He had like 48 hours to prep for Penn State, and he goes in and takes them apart. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, he threw the kitchen sink at him, but it's hard for Penn State because that was their first win. You're playing an 0-4 team at the time, and you're their first win at home. Ugh, that stings, especially on the heels of a tough one against Oregon, because of course that was a good game. Penn State was in that game to the very end. And then you lose to Northwestern, who the question with Northwestern is, I mean, just how talented are they really? I mean, they every year they've got maybe a couple guys that might be NFL players, but like depth on that roster, they are a smart kid school. And
maybe we read into this too much, but I can't believe I'm defending Penn State now, going, cross country game after an emotional loss to Oregon. There was a lot going against them. They should be a tougher team, but they're still kids, for goodness sake, looking at them. And then you go into Northwestern and they're going, oh, we smell blood too. Well, UCLA beat them. Yeah. Let's rile them up. They fired up the troops the right way. I think it's very easy when you look at Ohio State. losing to Michigan, unranked Michigan, Michigan having their number, but they're not going to just give up on their coach. I'm sure there were plenty of people calling for the coach's head.
Well, and I mean, that Ohio State example is great because not only did they not give up on their coach, they didn't give up on their season, and then they go and win a national championship.
Right.
So, I mean, who feels better, Michigan or Ohio State? Right. But the other thing for me, and this is the thing that they're not talking about as much as the losses themselves, is you lose Aller, your star quarterback, your multi-year star quarterback. I mean, it's hard to adjust to that, even though that, I mean, this is a big time roster. This is a many millions dollar roster for Penn State. They should be able to put somebody else in there who can get the job done. I just think in this day and age, when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal, and we've talked about this and the lack of regulation, they're trying to regulate it. Those regulations just don't have any teeth. Nobody is taking them seriously. And so I think when you fire a coach mid-season, you get ahead in the coaching search, sure. But you can't hire a sitting college coach in season. You're not going to be able to hire a sitting NFL coach in season. So who are you going for? And how much of an advantage does that really give you versus the disadvantage of now, unless you get lucky and your team rallies around the interim guy, you're just going to have a bunch of guys jumping into the portal as soon as the window opens.
Right.
And the window opens, I think, within it's like fairly soon after a coach gets fired. So it's so easy to lose. I mean, you could lose your whole roster. It's not likely. I mean, you've got guys that are loyal to Penn State, but you've got less and less of that school loyalty given the nature of things today. And I just think you can't take that for granted. And that's why, to me, those coaches, I think, deserve a little bit more runway. If he doesn't get it done the rest of the year, if he loses those 3 games and then finishes 7-5, yeah, sure, fire him. But let him see what he can do the rest of the year, because it's such a hard job. I don't think there is a more difficult coaching job today in sports than being a Power 4 college football coach, because it's not like in the NFL where, I mean, you've got guys that are going into free agency, all that, but like, it's a known number. It's not, well, potentially my whole roster. And the reality is, as we've seen with some of these programs that have lost their coach, they immediately start guys are dropping like flies. And it's so hard because you have to re-recruit your existing team. And then you've got to figure out, who am I going to bring in to make my team better? And oh, by the way, unless you have the budget that from the donors, do you really have enough? Can you miss on a guy? Can you have a guy that is, and like the example, and we talk about it as Nebraska fans, you look at like Elijah Pritchett, who we got from Alabama. He was a 4 or 5 star recruit out of high school, was a player there, but like wasn't a star there. But has certainly the ability, and you bring him in and he's supposed to be a boost to your offensive line, and he hasn't even started every game. And he's had some off the field issues and some issues in practice and disciplinary type stuff. But like, they paid him, I think, probably $500,000 to come play. So when you have a more limited budget, you're trying to compete with other Big Ten teams, you can't miss on that guy. And so then beyond that, you also have, and I think this gets into pro sports a little bit, where you've got a player that you've invested a lot of money in, whether he looks like he's the best guy for that spot or not, you've got a lot of pressure to play him anyway. And so that's where the coaches, they have to try to manage this whole thing. And then at the same time, they've got people up above them and a lot of noise that's telling them, no, you gotta stick with that guy. Put a lot of money into him.
Opening Pandora's box. I think the biggest thing here is how many questions are left unanswered, and then how the ripple effect When you look at a coach for Nebraska, who Nebraska's getting right back in that top 25 conversation, making a name in the Big Ten, you're going, man, the big guys just won't quit, and you know that they're pursuing Rule hard. And it'll be an interesting next couple of weeks as we get into football playoff talk and seeding and where teams line up. But yeah, overall, I think it's a terrible move. I hate it as both a fan, outside looking in, and then also looking at individual programs. The last thing I'll say on that is you look at Jay Norvell coming in to be the savior of CSU, the air raid offense, and just what an absolute joke of a program right now. And you look at it, and then they come out and they just lay a thumping on Fresno State. They were 7.5-point underdogs, end up winning. I think it was 48-21. And that's a coach that you just, hey, one, CSU can't afford to let go of them until January. They don't have the funds, but also, hey, let's play it out. We're not going to be a playoff team anyway. We just need to make a bowl. Can we find a way to 6 wins? There's just so many question marks.
Yeah. And you talk about the fact that, these are kids, right? You've got a locker room full of 18 to at most like 24-year-olds. They're still emotionally able to be, motivated or unmotivated. And that can have an immense impact on the performance on the field on a Saturday. And I think, when you look at some of these teams, obviously Colorado State has some talent, but they're not, at the level of most Power 4 teams or anything like that. They're maybe a few guys that have played pro on that roster, right? And yet, that lack of talent, if you're going against a more talented team like a Fresno State, but you're motivated and they're not, any given week, you can have a letdown if you're Fresno State. And then that boost that Colorado State gets from that win, now they all of a sudden start believing in themselves, and who knows what they can do. And we've seen it time and time again. Maybe they do that one time, and then the rest of the season is kind of more of, what we've seen thus far. But I think that's important. That's the key difference between college sports and professional sports. Even though we're treating this like really a pro game anymore, these are still kids. These are like babies in the grand scheme of things. And so it's that much more difficult as a coach. You're trying to manage all of these emotions of these kids. And also some of these kids are making millions of dollars a year.
Yep.
And they can just opt out for next year if they want, it's just, and I was very for NIL and the transfer portal, and I still am in theory, but gosh, what a difficult job.